And hey everyone, we have another fantastic episode of Live Free and Rant for you today. The world's not still burning, but we got tired of the burning background, so guess what? We have beautiful New Hampshire instead, which is still outside. If you look out the window, everything is still fine, you know? But at the same time, it kind of isn't fine. How's it going, Chris?
Well, we've only got 3 or 4 months left of this, I guess. Depends on who you
Or
ask.
years, you know? Depends on how optimistic you want to be.
Yeah, we're looking at anywhere between one more death and 2 million, and everybody's going to get it, or some people will get it, and you can't go outside, or the police will shoot you, or you can go outside, and nobody knows what the hell's going on, and the rules don't matter anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's been very interesting to watch. I mean, in other countries, like we've seen, and by the way, I don't necessarily trust everything I see out of other places because of like the unreliability of news. I've seen, I think it was CBS was taking some Italian hospital footage for B-roll on New York. They're busted reusing it for both. So it's hard, and I understand it's just B-roll, and for anyone who's had to actually produce video, it's not probably not a sinister move at all. It's probably just a lazy move. Like, just throw some background stuff. The problem is, it's like we never said it was from New York. It's just hospital footage, but it kind of, yeah, it's kind of dishonest too.
Well, one of my favorite sayings is never attribute to malice what you can attribute to, ignorance or however that saying goes. And
Stupidity.
yeah, stupidity. There you go. The media does this stuff all the time. Every time there's a hurricane, they stand off to the side of the road so it looks a lot deeper than it is, and there's and it happens every time there's some sort of crisis. They go for the shock value, and if they had footage from Italy and it was just easier to cut that back into the segment they were producing, then I mean, why wouldn't you? And then
Yeah.
they just got caught. That's their problem.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's always going to be a problem because there's a narrative issue. Is when you're if you have a truth, so whenever you're reporting the news, that's they call it a news story for a reason. It's you don't just like divulge a whole bunch of facts because that is nothing. It doesn't tell anyone anything. You're supposed to you're using the facts. You're putting using the facts to stitch together a story that's accurate, an accurate representation of what's going on. So sometimes if you just take a picture outside and just say, "This is what it looks like," and it just like it doesn't look that bad. I just see a little bit more wind than usual. But if it's actually serious, sometimes you'd want to like to like convey that it's actually more serious. The problem is then you start ramping up the narrative to where now it looks like it's way worse than it actually is, and you're scaremongering people. And so we see that with like buckets and buckets of hospital beds and stuff like that. And it's pretty. That's one thing I noticed is everyone seems to be freaking out a little bit. There's some stories about things actually being bad in places. Everywhere else where everyone is suffering, they're suffering because of the response to this crisis, right? The overwhelming, I would say, overreaction, or more importantly, misreaction of governments to just basically say, "Hey, you know what? Everything that everyone was doing to make everything work in the world, why doesn't everyone just stop?" It's like let's stop your lungs from breathing and your heart from beating for just a little while until we could figure all this out. In the meantime, you're passing out over there.
Yeah, well, we don't know if they've overreacted yet. We'll never know if they actually overreacted and did too much, because this thing would be completely different if the government had done nothing.
Hmm.
So we can't look now and say, oh, they overreacted. Yes, they have taken some pretty drastic actions, and a lot of people would argue they're unconstitutional or unlawful. But we can't say, oh, they've overreacted, because around there's people dying. There's still, exponential growth in the spread of the virus. So it's hard to say they've overreacted. One thing we can say for certain is nobody has underreacted, right? I don't
Yeah.
know of a government that has underreacted anything. They have overreacted, but it's going to be impossible to say until this thing is completely over.
Yeah, underreactions. Some people might be able to make the case for temper underreactions, as in haven't acted quickly enough. But generally speaking, they acted very quickly in trying to come put together this giant stimulus package thing, which I mean, we could speak for hours on why it's like kind of a dumb idea to just, give people money you had to steal from them in the first place to like somehow help things out, or print money from nowhere and give it to people, which means all the money they have will also be worth less. But that's a completely different discussion. It seems like they've rushed to put tons of pork in the stimulus bill, and that's the funny thing is, what was it? Of all the things that stood out, it was like a 25 million for the Kennedy Center for the Arts.
Yes.
Like, and supposedly someone involved had a very close relationship with that place.
Well, that's how most legislation works. Is somebody that's writing the bill, and they stick something in on your behalf. The funniest, well, I guess it's not funny because they got 25 million or billion or however much money from the taxpayers, and they immediately turned around and laid off all of their performers. They got, which I guess I don't know what the money was supposed to be for, but I imagine it's to keep people working and paying their bills while the entire economy is shuttered. And they just immediately turned around and laid off everybody, told them, we're not paying performers right now.
Yeah, and I think that's happened with a lot of these sort of bailout type things. Is say a business has to close its doors for a certain amount of time, and I mean, forcibly, and obviously they're not making money during that time, and they have some bills, and so people are thinking the bailout is keeping things like as normal. So if you have, for example, the Kennedy Center, what are we going to do? We can't perform, we can't make money from this. So they're just saying, why don't we get a giant like pork bailout so we can just live no problem during that time. But then we lay off all our performers, to cut costs, which is a smart move to do, I guess. But at the same time, that means the bailout doesn't actually help the suffering people. It's just the Center for the Arts kind of gets a free pass, while all the performers, don't. And so they're in all this craziness. Our brave congressman, not ours, but kind of ours, is ours, at least mine in my heart, Thomas Massie, has taken a stand against this and delayed the bill because he says this is just crazy, too much pork, and he's kind of drawn a little bit of ire for that.
He got pilloried.
Or Hillaried. Well, no, that's
well, he hasn't gotten Hillaried yet. Hopefully, he doesn't get Hillaried. We'll pray for Thomas Massie. Mm-hmm. But it seemed to be that he was the only congressperson that was speaking out against, and it wasn't so much against the bill itself, it was against the process. Because as you know, in our system of constitutional republic government, process matters. And this was rushed to the floor of the House after it passed the Senate. And it seems important to remind everybody that Nancy Pelosi delayed this bill by an entire week because she flew back from her district at the last minute and killed the Senate bill when it was going to be passed 6 days before. And she delayed it for a few days, and nothing in the bill even really changed after she delayed it for no good reason.
Probably the performing arts nonsense.
No, that was in there before, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, so she killed it for a few days. She delayed the bill. She signaled all along. She said, we'll have to look at it. And then it gets to the House, and she rushes it for a floor vote, and she wanted to use unanimous consent. So if nobody objected, they would just introduce the bill, pass it on a voice vote, and it would be onto the president's desk. And Thomas Massie, Republican representative from Kentucky, said, wait a minute, we have a process and we have a constitution, and the constitution says we need to have a quorum of the House to take any action. So a quorum in the House is half, so they would need 200 and because there's a few open seats right now, so 216 is a quorum as it stands. They were gonna bring back 50 or 100 total representatives, and he said no, we have to have a quorum. So a bunch of representatives, including the two from New Hampshire, had to rush back to D.C. at the last minute to vote on this thing.
Yeah.
And some people weren't happy about it.
Yeah, about due process and stuff. Yeah, and that's the thing is like let's just suspend everything in the midst of a crisis, and that's unfortunately becoming all too much of a common theme. And as we can see, when that kind of stuff happens, you have stuff like pork that goes into these emergency relief bill and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, but some people weren't happy about that, including our good buddy Don Don.
Our Orange Man bad.
Yes. So as we can
And
see, right,
in this, I usually don't agree with the Orange Man bad references, but in this one, I agree that Orange Man was bad.
Orange Man
He
was
went
bad. He
he
says,
went on a tirade.
yes, as you could probably see over here, it says, looks like a third-rate grandstander named Representative Thomas Massie, a congressman from, unfortunately, a truly great state, Kentucky, wants to vote against the new Save Our Workers bill in Congress. He just wants publicity. He can't stop it, only delay, which is both dangerous and other stuff. Which is, first off,
Yeah, there was a second part of that tweet too. Could you pull up the second part of that tweet?
let me see. Let me make sure. I can't quite. And costly. Workers and small businesses need money now in order to survive. Virus wasn't their fault. It was hell dealing with the Dems. Had to give up some stupid things in order to get the big picture done. 90% great. Win back House, but throw Massey out of the Republican Party. Which,
Well, that last line is what I was looking for. Throw Massie out of the Republican Party. What I mean, talk about short-sighted.
oof, yeah. Talk about short-sighted. Just like for this one little thing, and let me just say, it's painful to read this guy's tweets. I can't. It doesn't. It's very like staccato. Just very like he cannot get through a whole sentence without like interjecting a million things in there. From unfortunately a truly great state, Kentucky wants to vote. Like, oh, this is hard on the eyes, man. But so Trump, who I'm sure he has a lot in common with this guy, with Representative Massey. I'm sure there's a lot they agree on. There's a lot they work together on. But this is just too far. It is anytime you just say, "Hey, I'm gonna disagree with you and do go against exactly the thing you want right now." All of a sudden, he throws a fit and just starts screaming. And of course, our good sassy friend Massey. This is a good one. So, when a crime a day is a Twitter account that kind of basically chronicles how easy it is to commit a crime in this country, unfortunately, and because so many things are criminalized. So it said, "So, what crimes are you committing tonight?" And good old sassy Massey says, "Candor, premeditated. It's apparently a felony in D.C." Which is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome tweet.
Some people might need some background on Thomas Massie. I mean, we told you what he is, but he is more libertarian than Rand Paul, in my estimation, but
Probably.
a little bit less libertarian. Mm-hmm. He's been in the House, I don't know how long. He's in the middle of a tough primary against a never Trumper who is accusing Thomas Massie of not being sufficiently pro-Trump.
Yeah, which is a very strange.
On that one.
Yeah, politics are, the alliances people make, the principles don't tend to matter, as it turns out, because principally this guy should be on the good side, quote, good side of things. But it's actually hard to tell because there's a lot of pro-liberty stuff that came behind the Trump momentum, and the man himself is just everywhere, just all over the map. I can't really tell what he's for, but it changes. Like super authoritarian now. He's been like pro-liberty in certain ways later. I don't think he knows what he's doing, but Massey knows what he's doing, and it could be destroying his whole career, unfortunately. But what's he gonna do? You got to stand up for something.
Yeah, he's taken a principled stance on the fact that we can't just pass $2.2 trillion in spending in money that we don't have without, he wanted a recorded vote, a roll call vote in the House, and nobody seconded the motion. So, I mean, we're talking about $2.2 trillion in spending of money that we don't have that belongs to the taxpayers. It probably raised our national debt up to 25 or 26 trillion almost overnight. And they wanted to pass it on unanimous consent with no debate at all. No talking about what's in the bill, no talking about where the money's going or who's going to pay for it. And even he has asked where the money's coming from, which is insane
Yeah.
because Thomas Massie and AOC almost agreed for half a second.
Yeah, it's so bizarre because whenever you have principles, and I don't know AOC well enough to know her principles or how maybe a pretense of principle for now, but whatever it is, you kind of come full circle with that. And the reason why we have this whole like why would you want to force a vote when a vote was already kind of happening, like a voice vote? Like why would you want to force a vote with the same outcome? Well, guess what? It ties your actual vote to your record. So it's not just, it passed. Sorry, everyone no one really objected, so therefore it passed. It's like, no, we want to say who voted for this because there's a lot of people who just don't want to be accused of holding this thing up, but they also don't want their names attached to all this nonsense that's in there. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? You got to stand on your principles and take the heat for whatever you believe in. And so that's kind of what he's forcing. It's not an actual outcome. He's forcing, accountability, which is there's no accountability in politics these days, except for from this guy. So I would give him I saw this fantastic meme from I forget where, but our my Hitler Resistor of the Year award because again for audio listeners, it's the picture of everyone doing the Nazi salute and the one conscientious objector not saluting, and they photoshopped Thomas Massie's face on him, which is pretty fantastic because he's the one
Yeah,
dude.
well, just to be clear, just to be clear, we are not calling Trump Hitler. We don't think Trump is Hitler. He's obviously not as bad as Hitler. He's not killing millions of Jews.
Not yet. He loves the Jews. They're the best. But give it a little time. You never know. And that's the ultimate thing with this is you never know where government can end up if you don't keep it in check. I mean, isn't America, the entire principle of this country behind we don't like what people are doing without our consent. We don't like that we have no representation for our taxation. We want to be able to basically restrain government as much as possible, which ultimately did not work out as well as they planned, in my opinion, but it kind of did work out to a certain extent. And if we aren't keeping on fighting against constant encroachment, it's just going to end back up into basically monarchy again.
Yeah, well, anytime we get a national emergency or even a local emergency like this, that's when we see the growth of government in extreme ways, bypassing the normal means of procedure. Mm-hmm. There's statutes written to allow governors and presidents great latitude under the national emergency guidelines, and they can pretty much do whatever they want as long as there's an emergency that requires them to do whatever they want or to take all these measures that otherwise they would have to go through the legislature and could be challenged in court and yada, yada, yada. But now, because we have the national emergency, we have a local state emergency, we have all the emergencies are declared. Now that opens up this whole new brand of laws that just allows them to, by government decree, as if they were a king, kind of impose whatever sort of regulation or penalty they want. And we're seeing that across the country at the federal level and at state levels. Like, for example, in Rhode Island, the governor down there, Gina Raimondo, is sending the National Guard door to door looking for refugee New Yorkers.
Yeah, which, I mean, that is a reasonable action in any season, not just a crisis. But hey, I mean, it is. I understand it's not entirely freedom loving right there. But like seriously, like a quarantine, like what happens if you catch them? What, you're gonna like banish the COVID with them? Like, haven't they already infected whoever they're with? And it's like at this point where you're going door to door for undocumented New Yorkers. I mean, this is getting a little like Hitlery right here. I don't know if that's a word, but it might as well be one because it's a little off when you're going door to door with armed soldiers just saying, does you have any New Yorkers in here? It's like
It's
it's pretty
it's
bad.
I mean, and Florida is putting not lockdowns, border checkpoints at their state borders. They're looking for people from New Orleans. They're looking for people from Florida or New Jersey. New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Maine. They've all asked people coming from New York or New Jersey to self quarantine for 14 days. At least in New Hampshire, Governor Sununu asked if they would do it voluntarily. He didn't say
Hmm.
you have to. He said if you're coming from these hotspots, you should do what's right and self isolate yourself for 14 days because
Hmm.
it's the right thing to do, and you could be spreading it to other people. In other states, they're talking about fining people, they're talking about arresting people, and on the same token, they're talking about letting people out of jail, nonviolent offenders. They want to let nonviolent offenders out of jail and then put New Yorkers in them, I guess.
That is pretty funny right there. Nonviolent offenders, which first off, I honestly don't think they should be in jail to begin with. I mean, there's a lot of nuance behind that statement, but generally speaking, I mean, if you stole some stuff from someone, maybe that's not violent, but that is still worthy of jail time, maybe. But generally speaking, if you're not like a risk, you're letting them out, but then you're putting just for the crime of being from New York, which I do understand is not something to be taken lightly, but I don't know if it could be outright criminalized, you know? And now we're starting to get to someone honestly has to make a satire movie out of this whole thing because this is literally like we all the what do you call it, millennials and zoomers and whatever else, all the young folk who have grown up on zombie apocalypse movies have been just lusting after such a thing to happen in real life. Like, if we're going to have a hard time in life, at least let there be zombies. And it's turning out that, like, I mean, I'm going to be gloss over some facts and bend some facts and be a little, insensitive to people who've actually suffered from the virus. But let me, just for the sake of dramatization, for like a high powered sniffle. Now, because of the high powered sniffle, now the National Guard is being deployed and actually hunting down zombies. And they're like, no, I just kind of maybe got a cough. It's like, why are you going to shoot me? Ah, die, zombie. And the government is acting like this is a zombie apocalypse. And it's just people with, a sickness that some people can die from. It can hospitalize some people, but largely a lot of people aren't really going to be hurt that bad by it. And more importantly, like, it just the whole zombie apocalypse thing is, I'm sure, it's like a metaphor. If you think about it, it's a metaphor for how the government sees a crisis of, we got to batter down the hatches, we got to go shoot everything that moves, everyone out there is got to be it's like some kind of a thing that we got to get after, just like survive against like the people doing whatever they want, the uncontrolled, unthinking, they're not with the group. So the whole zombie apocalypse thing is real, but it's only in megalomaniacs' imaginations. Yeah.
Yeah, you froze there for a second. I
Yeah,
didn't
sorry.
catch the end of that, but if there were zombies, so we have, New Hampshire is a big
Mm-hmm.
Second Amendment state, a lot of gun owners, not a lot of gun restrictions. And a lot of people have been flocking to the gun stores in the past couple of weeks because of not the pandemic per se, but the government's response
Yeah, and like what they
when they
could.
start closing down
Yeah,
what you consider a non-essential business, or when you start closing down, and you start imposing, local police departments start getting a little tyrannical
frisky.
from the governor's office. So a lot of people have been out buying guns for the first time, which I think is great. I hope they use them responsibly and get trained. I have a couple close friends that have bought their first firearm, and I have a bunch more asking me, how to do it, what should I get, where can I practice, and stuff like that. So make sure you get trained, be responsible if you're buying one. But I think a lot of people's eyes are opening up to the fact that the government's been overreaching, and there are no zombies.
Yeah,
So, with all the guns we have, it would be great if there were zombies because there would be a lot of us having a lot of fun. But please don't go shoot people that have coronavirus because it's not the responsible thing to be doing. That violates the
yeah,
NAP.
yeah. Absolutely. The whole gun thing. It's funny because a lot of people feel like, no, who needs a gun? All this kind of stuff. Now, in a crisis, it turns out gun stores are essential businesses. And so are liquor stores, which I think is funny because we go to the great subject of what is an essential business. First off, as I'm sure from the title of this thing you will have known, my stance is every business is essential. Every business is essential to someone, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper. But first, apparently the New Hampshire state liquor stores have had some issues maintaining proper staffing to run their essential operations. So we have a nice handy dandy tweet from the governor right here. Proud to work with NH Liquor and Wine to secure a 10% raise for dedicated employees during this unprecedented time. They're looking to hire additional part-time staff in the coming weeks. Apply here. So first off, if you've been deemed non-essential by the powers that be and you're out of work, go work for the booze stuff. Go work for the New Hampshire liquor stores because they're hiring. But also, isn't this kind of funny how a lot of people got shut down? Like they just, you can't work because you're not essential. And then the government deems liquor to be not alcohol in general. You can still buy beer and wine lots of other places. The way New Hampshire works is, for some reason, the government is like the lone cartel in charge of liquor, hard liquor. So the liquor stores, the New Hampshire state government has mandated that specific subset of alcohol is so essential that not only is it not going to get shut down, but now they're expanding. Business is booming.
I would like to point out that this morning, the New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlets actually announced that 7 or 8 of their locations are going to be temporarily closed because they don't have enough staff to man the stores because of the coronavirus. So that could be because to come in, or they could be extra vulnerable and they don't want to come in and risk getting sick. So the Milford there's a bunch of stores near me, Milford, Swansea, Winchester, that have closed because they don't have enough help. They've the open hours for the locations from 11 to 6. They're open now, and they're giving out raises to employees that are there because they just apparently can't keep enough help. But I will say on the liquor being essential part that we don't want emergency rooms clogged with alcoholics experiencing DTs. If we start clogging emergency rooms with alcoholics experiencing DTs on top of coronavirus patients, we're just going to exacerbate the stress on the healthcare system, which is why liquor is an essential industry.
Yeah,
it's a sad commentary on society,
but it's probably true.
Yeah.
Well, now this is as a non-alcoholic, as someone who enjoys alcohol quite a bit, but has no problem doing without it. I don't quite understand the differences. So, doesn't say one is an alcoholic, and your alcohol of choice is liquor. If there's none available, are you still like not going into withdrawal if you have beer available, or is it's just nowhere near strong enough, and you have to drink so much beer, and it's just not going to work out? Do you actually need liquor if that's what you're kind of hooked on, or does any alcohol work?
I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. But I would say that if you're pounding down a couple handles a day of hard liquor, and you want to switch to beer, it's probably not going to cut it.
I just have no concept of that level of alcohol absorption. Like, think, I'll have a few drinks and you're already kind of done. Like, I cannot imagine, like, a single handle by a couple over the course of a day, I would call that, like, alcoholics. But a single person with, like, that's just terrible. But it is funny to see that the governor's deeming this as essential. And he also apparently deems other workers as essential. So, tone-deaf tweet of the decade or whatever. He just said, we've seen hundreds of pictures of kids spreading positivity with their signs and chalk drawings, all this kind of stuff about Easter. And then they're putting a little image that says, the Easter Bunny is essential. And I know that's kind of like, it's cute. We're trying to everyone's hang together, crew or whatever. But former state rep Yvonne Dean Bailey commented, "So the Easter Bunny is an essential worker, and my mom isn't." Could this be more of a dick tweet? So I believe her mother works in cosmetics, and that's one of those, like, when you look at the essential businesses list, there's so everything's exempted. Basic, everything's essential. You're essential, you're essential, you're essential. Look under your shirt, oh, you're essential. Everyone's essential apparently, except basically like barbershops and nail salons.
And
Like,
tattoo parlors. And tattoo parlors.
yeah, there's like literally just a very small set of people, of businesses, that are just determined to be not essential. And I mean, that's a slap in the face, I think, because there's so many. Like, for example, what if you're an ice cream shop? Are you essential? I mean, what if you're a donut shop? Like, okay, does Dunkin' Donuts, do they get to shut off their donut part of their thing and just focus on coffee and other more nourishing, if that's even a word applicable to anything from Dunkin' Donuts, nourishing fare? Like, at what point do you decide something's essential or not? There's so many things out there that you can still, and by the way, I think you should be able to, right? Go out there and do whatever. But then if you want to get your nails done or your haircut done, you just know or get a sweet ink that just says, I survived COVID-19, fingers crossed, or something. Like, all that is just not essential. It's like, where do you draw that line?
The I mean, if you're cutting somebody's hair or if you're tattooing their body, it would be impossible to maintain the social distancing guidelines that they have put out there, which is where I assume they drew the line. Because if you're cutting somebody's hair, you have to be, well, close enough to touch them. With the social distancing guidelines that everybody is following now, you can't cut somebody's hair from 6 feet away. Not if you want a decent haircut anyways. I mean, I suppose you could tie one of the,
get those little grabbers,
just go for it. Might not look that great. And by the way, if anybody's listening and does black market haircuts, I am in the market. I can't go another 5 weeks. So if you know anybody doing black market haircuts, hit me up. I'll come to you, or you can come to mine.
Yeah.
I just won't tell anybody in the government because it would be a violation of state law. We don't want to let the Gestapo know. No, but no. On a serious note,
by the way, before we go to the serious note, on a honest note, I don't frequently get my hair cut. It's not every month, I don't think. It's like every couple months, depends on how crazy I get. I just, get it close, and I intentionally cut it shorter than I want it because I just let it poof out over time. And so literally I've been training for this apocalypse. Like, the one thing I don't have access to, I've been training for it for so long, and my time has come. And so you get to soak up all the black market haircutters because I don't need them. Anyway, serious note, go ahead.
Well, yeah, normally I go at least 4 or 5 months in between a haircut too. Once it gets, poofy enough that I can't, if I have to comb my hair in the morning, then it's too long. And if I have to start using my wife's hair conditioner because it starts to gnarl together or whatever it does, I don't know what the proper terminology. It's time to get a haircut, and I'll usually wait a month beyond that because I'm lazy and don't have time, and I have 2 kids and yada yada yada. But I think it's the governor on his Twitter always puts out kind of cutesy stuff like the Easter Bunny, and who else was deemed essential there on that tab?
I think it was just the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy.
Oh, the Tooth Fairy, Fairy. Of course, the Tooth Fairy, because children are still going to lose teeth. He's always put out, little cutesy stuff like that. The guy is liked by most of the people in the state. He enjoys a 67% approval rating or something like that, including a 50% approval rating among Democrats. And it's because he's just a guy. You could sit down with him for a beer, no problem. I certainly would. So that's where that kind of stuff comes from.
Did you get in personal contact with them recently?
I don't know what you mean. No, I haven't.
I heard rumor. Really, I heard rumor he sent you a message at some point.
Every once in a while he'll comment on one of my Facebook posts.
Yeah. Which, again, an everyman kind of a thing, which most governors I don't think do for anything. it's just such a small town kind of vibe around here.
in their castles high, on high. No, I think last year, actually, the first time the governor commented on one of my Facebook posts, I was starting a fantasy baseball league last year. I had two open slots,
Hmm.
and he posted some sort of GIF telling me that it was, illegal or something like that, or I was an illegal gambler, and I forget how that worked out, but
And
I thought it was
it
kind of
was
funny.
illegal back then, wasn't it?
I think I don't know if it still is. I don't know I'm not going through DraftKings, so I'm not paying the right person. I'm not doing the right cronyism, I guess.
Yeah, well, that is a little bit like Orwellian. It's like Big Sununu was watching. It's like he's watching your like shit posts about whatever. And he's like, ah, just so you know, I can send the stadies after you.
Yeah, that must be why he comments on my posts from time to time. I don't know. It's only been a few times, but and then I remember I go, "Oh yeah, everybody can see everything that I post. I wonder what I've posted recently that's bad about him."
Probably, I mean, you seem to be pretty supportive in general, and I kind of take the same opinion as well. Not, there's a lot of, like 90% of the stuff that he's done lately I've been very annoyed with, to be sure. But it's a contextual thing of who else could have been doing way worse, and contextually is this bad? It's just like when people say, oh, what's your property tax rate? Oh, it's so high. It's like I'm willing to not complain about high taxes if they're way lower than everywhere else. It's like, yeah.
Be high, but really low.
Hmm.
And I'm mostly supportive, like 90%, I guess. A lot of the stuff he does has been good for the cause of liberty and
Hmm.
for freedom overall. The stuff lately is disappointing to see, especially in the live free or die state, which is why many of us live here and choose to stay here. But I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about this, and I said, "Well, what would you do if you were in his shoes?" And he clarified,
Hmm.
if I was in his shoes, I would have to do the exact same sort of thing because the people that elected me count on me to do stuff like he's been doing. He said, however, if I were in my shoes and I happened to be the governor, I would be doing things a lot differently. But
Yeah.
for me to be governor, a lot of things would have to change in their entirety because the people that would elect me are a lot different than the people that have elected Governor Sununu.
Oh, absolutely. And we even see Thomas Massie, who has, I guess, a very freedom loving electorate that's voting for him. But even then, he's just getting roasted over doing exactly the kind of stuff that he was applauded for when it was not Trump in power. And now he's still being himself, but he's like getting roasted, and who knows, he might not get reelected. And this is someone who ran on that. Now, Chris Sununu did not run on that stuff. He ran on kind of more of a moderate, centrist, everyone gets along kind of stuff. And he almost got his ass kicked by Frank Edelblut, who was it? Is he what's his current title?
Commissioner of Education.
Yeah, he's the education commissioner now, but he came so close to the fact if there was a recount, he possibly could be governor today. It's like very close. Like it was extremely close, and I think that kind of showed Sununu that this is his base. This base actually loves freedom and wants this guy who's been to PorcFest, homeschools his bunch of kids, like this kind of a guy. Like this is the guy he almost like the Jeb Bush or whatever of the New Hampshire election. Although that's a huge insult today. I don't mean it in that way, but I'm saying like the political dynasty family. Everyone gets along with him, sort of. I'm the easy guy. That guy almost lost to this radical dude, and so it's like, okay, I have to be more freedom loving than I otherwise would have in order to keep going. And he's like, I applaud him for that because he's actually done it. He's actually, for the most part, been pretty good. Like almost like you elected a good guy, and then there's bits here and there, and then now I think he just wants to keep everything together, and then just all this kind of pressure from everywhere to do stupid things, and he has to do some of them. And the orders that he's been issuing have been pretty funny because it seems like he he feels like he has to issue orders that say that he has to say, I'm locking down this, I'm essential business only, I'm blah blah blah. He has to do all this stuff, but then everything you tell he's like really embarrassed about. He's like, just so you know, you can totally not do what I suggested to do, and oh, just so you know, everything is kind of essential, and if it's not essential, just let us know and we'll make you essential. You know, like he's like doing all these little caveats because you can tell he's not comfortable just swinging the big hammer of tyranny around and smacking people down left and right. At least that's my
Yeah.
my perception.
Well, no, that's a pretty good perception of it, I think, because you look
Mm-hmm.
at, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maine all issued the same type of,
Mm-hmm.
stay-at-home order. And he came out, and Governor Sununu did, and he said, we're issuing a stay-at-home order. But if you look at the emergency order itself, it's really you should stay home.
Mm-hmm.
But in case you go out, you can't go to the beach and you can't get your hair cut, but everything else is probably good. And if for some reason you're not on the list, call my office and we'll just make sure. And within the first day, not even 24 hours after the order was issued, there was a whole nother 2 sections added to the list of essential businesses, which was real estate and something else, so that real estate transactions can continue to happen. So it was really, the order itself was a lot more expansive than our neighboring states that are
Yeah,
entirely
permissive.
liberal. It was a lot less cumbersome, I guess we
Mm-hmm.
could say. Now, I don't want to minimize the people that are deemed quote unquote non-essential, because them losing their jobs even temporarily sucks. It sucks for them. It sucks for their family. It sucks for their financial status. Um, when you can't make money and put food on the table, and you have to depend on the government handout instead. So the government forced you to close, and now the government's going to give you money to stay closed. And most people don't want that kind of life. They want to do their job. They want to do their business. Like Yvonne D.
Mm-hmm.
He'd
Yeah.
rather be working than collecting a unemployment check on steroids, as Nancy Pelosi called it, or Chuck Schumer, or whoever.
Yeah, nothing. But steroids can't make you win a fight always. Sometimes that doesn't even help. But it's funny. You're talking about the haircut thing, the black looking for a dealer. Who can hook you up? Can you hook me with a blade? Razor, clipper. Hook me up with a clipper. You know, trench coats with like what is like wall trimmers and stuff on them. Uh, Everyone's working from home now, and this whole podcasting, video conferencing thing, now a lot of people are going to be on camera a lot, like a lot more than they otherwise may have been, with like people all over the world. And what happens if they look like Robin Williams and Jumanji with the "what year is it" look? Like that could be detrimental to their professional performance. And it's definitely discriminatory against the kinds of people who aren't, let's just say, bald, who can just like just trim their own, do the head fade, and then all right, I'm good to go. It's like if you actually have a hairstyle, and like mine is just poofy, it's messy, it's whatever, it's not manicured, but like a lot of people, if they don't have that nice little fade going all the time, they just start looking like not very good, not very professional, and it could actually impact their lives. So I would argue that hair professionals are pretty essential, but more importantly, everyone is essential. Every child is special and every business is essential because businesses is how people don't die. And I don't know how I can hammer that home quite enough, but if you run a business, and you don't have that, absent something else in that place, you die. Like you don't have money, you can't pay your bills, you can't feed yourself, you can't do anything. How is that not what one could call essential?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's I certainly don't envy being in the position of having to make those decisions,
Mm-hmm.
or being forced to make those decisions, especially from a free market kind of perspective, or a live free or die kind of perspective, or even the libertarian perspective, because every business is essential to the owners, the investors, the employees, the suppliers, the customers. Every if a business was truly non-essential, they wouldn't be in business anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I tend to look at these kind of things. You could look at like Furby.
Yeah.
Remember those stupid
Unfortunately.
rat tool, rat toy things? Um, that everybody loved about 18 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever it was. Well, they found out that Furbies are not essential and they're not around anymore, even though they did try to make a comeback
Mm-hmm.
kind of recently. But, if a business turns a profit and it provides a product that people want and people buy that product and they employ people doing that, then they are essential to somebody.
Yeah.
So who is the government to say what is essential and what is not? Well, I don't know. Not for me to say, I guess. And we have some work to do, probably over the next couple of years after this pandemic subsides, to kind of bring the public back into the perspective that the government doesn't get to decide what an essential business is and what it is not.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you think, like, say there 80% is essential and 20% isn't. Let's just say something like that, although it's much, much different, I'm sure, in real life. If you talk about people building basic infrastructure, food, things like that, people in those industries are essential. People in the frivolous industries, like, say, Hollywood or sports teams or whatever, are not essential. Okay, let's just say that for a second. So, what do you expect? Those people who are in the non essential people to go work in the essential services? Because there's not enough market demand for all that stuff. Like, for example, if we have people supplying the world with food, like, other than your, what do you call it, your COVID-15, when you your first 15 pounds from just being cooped up in the house and eating all the time. Other than that, people aren't eating more food now that there's a disaster. The current producers of food already made everyone satisfied. And so you can't have like this 20% just jump into the food services because they're not needed. And if they do, then they'll have to take other people's jobs, or everyone gets a huge pay cut, and then they can't feed their family and all this kind of stuff. And so what do you do with those non-essential people? You can't fold them into essential industries because there's just no room for them. They just have to starve. And now you have charity cases on your hands. Now they can't do anything. And then there's a bunch of people who might. And here's the thing, is human beings are very fragile creatures psychologically. Like, physically, I mean, I'm sure, yeah, but psychologically especially. That's why liquor stores are deemed essential in this time. Because can you imagine how many people would go nuts, would cause more domestic violence, or who just spiral out of control, get stressed, and then go into the hospital because, stress weakens the body and you can have any condition can be exacerbated. All the problems deal like that. People with entertainment, things to get their minds off things, hobbies to get used to, all those kinds of things that just keep people healthy and happy and just running and efficient in the essential work that they do. If the non-essential is essential to the essential, and so when you ban the essentials, like if you make everyone, look like a homeless person when they're on their Zoom call because they can't get a haircut, and do you think that's going to harm their productivity? I think so. Or what if now that their mom, again, what if their mom can't cut the hair anymore and now they're scared about their mom's future because she can't work, and then they're all stressed, and that affects the essential industries. So, in conclusion, every business is essential in my view.
I agree completely that every business is essential. And, for many of the reasons that you just stated, we have no idea what the downstream effects of this economic lockdown or shutdown are going to be. And we're only, it's March 30th today. We're talking about this going until May 4th in New Hampshire. President Trump said April 30th yesterday. There's some professionals saying that it could be till the end of May. So we could be looking at another month or two or even possibly three of complete and utter economic.
Yeah.
For all the people that say, "Oh, it'll just bounce right back," I have news for you. You can't just bounce right back from 2 months of economic shutdown or 4 months.
I mean,
it doesn't work that way, because there's a lot of people that are going to be completely out of business by the time that the country or states or regions open back up. And 4, 6, 8 months from now, when people who do have savings start chewing through the rest of their savings, now we're talking about a long-term recession in my view.
Definitely. And for just a thought exercise on this, What if there's what if there's no disaster? What if there's no calamity? What if it's just life as usual? Take any person in the life as usual thing and just say, hey, you know what? Why don't you not work for 6 months? No income for 6 months. How about that? And no no familiarity with, like, for example, you also your skills atrophy, your business relationships atrophy. Like, it's not, you can't just go back in, but also combine that with just no money for 6 months. What are you gonna do? Okay, well, it sucks for a lot of people. You might have to sell a lot of stuff. You might have to move to a cheaper place. You're probably gonna have to go into debt, and then you go back to work. Okay, you find a job and it's like, well, are you as good as you were when you stopped? Maybe. Can you get the same job back? Even if you say you get the same job back, you had 6 months of just not earning, of stress on your life and problems that could have aged you, could made you, given you health problems, and it could have caused a spiral effect. You could have started drinking. Now you have a drinking problem. Now you're even more in the hole financially, and then now you're back at work, and it's like, okay, well, now I have to kick this alcohol habit. I got to lose all this weight that I gained from whatever. I got to, I have irreparable aging on my body from all this stress. Oh, now I have all this money that not only do I have to like buy back stuff, or not only do I have to, get out of debt, but there's interest on the debt. And now you're in this hole. You might have gotten your car repossessed or something. Now you can't even go to work. Now you got to like carpool with people. Just 6 months or whatever, a few months of being out of work is just not good for anyone. And now the whole world is out of work. Oh my goodness. The whole world is not really out of work, but like a giant chunk of the economy is just nope. And it's bad enough that this kind of stuff happens as a result of the virus, that people are having to radically adjust their business models and things like that. But the fact is, there's been a mandated worst case scenario. Like, for example, say you're a restaurant or whatever, and I already saw before this stuff, I went to coffee and there was like very few people there. It's like you already saw it before there was any mandates or talks or anything. It was already not kind of getting rough for business. And the worst case scenario is you have to close down. And guess what? The government mandated the worst case scenario for just about a lot of businesses. Just that's it. And I'm sure there's a lot of other ways you could survive the crisis. The businesses could still be affected. They'd have to do things differently. I went to again, an essential business, Trader Joe's on Sunday, and they run a pretty tight ship over there. First off, they only let 30 people in the store at any one time, which is not a lot at all. That's like 10% or less than their usual. And then, they have this bouncer dude. Bouncer at Trader Joe's is pretty hilarious. But this bouncer dude at the front, and he's spraying down all the shopping carts, wiping them down. And here you go, there you go. And everyone lined up outside. They have chalk marks on the sidewalk of like the good socially acceptable the social distance. And it's like they run, and of course they can't have as many customers as usual. It's just obvious. But they're dealing with it in a non-government prescribed way. They're actually just adapting to this trying time in their own free market way, and it's working. I mean, I don't know how well it's working, but it's working. I'd rather see the whole economy just adapting to this in their best way they see possible, rather than how just worst case mandated, and then they're destroyed.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time at like Home Depot and Lowe's over the past week, and they're too essential, and they've been adapting. They're putting those giant carts in front of the registers so that you can't come within 6 feet of the cashier. They have the same thing, the chalk lines on the checkout lines where they're spaced 6 feet apart, I guess. The cashiers are frequently disinfecting the registers and the surfaces, and they're wearing gloves in a lot of cases. And I saw one cashier wearing a mask. So these, there are ways, if the essential businesses can find a way to stay open and keep their employees and customers safe, then I'm sure non-essential businesses, quote unquote, could do the same. Without the force of government. It's going to take a little bit of time for people to get used to, because we don't wear masks, we don't wear gloves. Everybody in America shakes hands, those kind of things.
Now you got the Corona bump.
Yeah, now you got the Corona bump, the chicken wing, and I think if you do the chicken wing, you're still even too close
Yeah, do the foot tap.
guidelines or whatever. It's going to take a while for people to shift to the new societal norms as they I don't know what they're going to be. I don't know if handshakes are going to be a thing of the past now. I don't know that, but it'll take a while for people to adjust to this social distancing kind of lifestyle, I guess. I don't know if this is going to be a thing moving forward or if it'll go away after the coronavirus. I mean, there's a lot, the business paradigm might shift, the social paradigm might shift, the education paradigm might shift. And there's a lot that's going to come out of this in the next year or 2 years or however many years that we can't even predict yet, probably.
Yeah, it's going to be rough times. And I do not believe we should just take it for granted as far as just accept that this is the way life has to be, that the way life was. I mean, I do think that we have to sort of accept that life is going to be a certain way now because I don't think that there's enough freedom loving people to turn the momentum of statism back in the short term. I just don't think so. But we can't accept the past as well. It had to happen, and they took the right action. We have to dissect it as it's going along, and also afterwards, after it's all said and done, and just say, this is where the government screwed up. This is where they did. This is where they did. This is where they screwed up. And here is something we could have done if we had the freedom to do this. These are the long-term effects of the order that, no, this is a blah, blah, blah. We have to make sure we have a good, strong case for, man, this was terrible, and it wasn't just because of the disease. It was because of the other disease, which is love of government. Well, that might be a good time to wrap this thing up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's good, man. We're about an hour, it looks like. So,
Yeah, perfect.
I can't stop touching my face. Everybody's going to point that out, I'm sure, because, my coronavirus hands are touching my face over and over again.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's good for this week. And we'll see. I mean, a lot can change by the next time we do this, which will be a week from now. So who knows what we'll be talking about next Monday.
It'll be exciting. But at some point, we're taking this thing live, too. So that'll be exciting to do. But lots of prep. But anyway, remember, everyone, remember to live free. And even if you can't, at least you can rant. Bye for now.